Having an EQ pedal is something that I think is underrated. It doesn't ever seem to be like the first pedal that people reach for, but it could have a huge impact on the sound of your synths or your tracks in the studio or in a live setting as well, especially if there's other members or instruments within your mix. Yes, many instruments and especially synths already have their own built-in EQ, but in terms of hardware effects pedals, the more different effects that you add, the more you're gonna eventually need some sort of EQ somewhere on your chain. Having an EQ at the end or maybe even in the middle of your effects chain is a great way to polish your parts. It's useful to every artist, so whether you're performing live, producing, or even sampling or doing some sort of sound design. And now let's get into a quick summary of each of these 7 EQ or filter pedals, followed by a more in-depth review of my top 3. There's a lot of information in this video. I think it would help to sort of sum all of these pedals up in a few sentences. Earthquaker Devices, spatial delivery. Simplest pedal in the bunch. It's an auto filter pedal more so than an EQ pedal. If you're a guitar player, you're most likely gonna like this pedal. Dreadbox, Kinematic. It's a dual function as a filter and compression pedal, so not an EQ. It's also got a really nice drive as well, which works well in combination with the filter to give you some interesting and crunchy textures. It's also the only pedal in this comparison with CV in and out options. So if you're a modular person, it might be just right for you. Old Blood Noise Endeavors Float. This is a dual left-right filter pedal, which gives you tons of control over your filter LFO, very hands-on, no menu diving involved. Empress ParaEQ Mark II. Possibly, in my opinion, the juiciest pedal board EQ in the bunch. Quite precise, and what I especially like about it is that it forces you to use your ears rather than rely on visuals for your EQ. We all know visuals can be useful as well. The only downside is that you need 2 of these for a stereo image. GFI System Enigma. Contrary to the ParaEQ, it gives you the clearest visual of your EQ in the bunch. Also tons of presets to choose from. Different types of EQ. It's also a stereo expander. The only thing is that with so much information packed into a small pedal, you're bound to be menu diving, which may or may not be for you. Source Audio EQ2. Arguably one of the most standard EQ pedals of the bunch, but in a much smaller size. Again, you have sufficient control over frequency, Q, and everything else you would need for an effects board EQ pedal. And finally, Boss EQ200. Definitely compared to the Enigma, you're not getting quite as clear of a visual, but you still have more or less just as much control. You're also getting this hands-on section here with all of these bands to work with. And also some clever audio routing if you'd like to re-EQ any given signal more than once. Empress ParaEQ Deluxe Mark II. Going back to the idea of EQ pedals being an underrated tool for anyone's effects chain. This is where the ParaEQ comes into play really nicely just because of the amount of precision that you have with this pedal. The thing I like most about this EQ pedal in this comparison, compared to like these beasts which give you such a clear visual of what's going on, sometimes it actually disservices you to rely on a visual. The ParaEQ forces you to use your ears, which I think is a good thing. Here is the layout of the pedal from top to bottom. We've got our Q here, so a fatter Q or a much more precise surgical Q. We have our low frequency from 35 to 500. We could boost that or reduce that from 15 to minus 15 dB. Same thing for mids, so 250 to 5K, and then 1K to 20K. So there is a little bit of crossover between these 3 bands here. On this 4th row down here, we've got some other EQ moves as well. And then we've just got a big old boost on the bottom here, which is great if you want to boost your entire signal. So like any good EQ pedal, you've just got a bunch of layers to work with here. Like the Dreadbox Cinematic, obviously a much different pedal, but you're working with 100% analog circuits with the ParaEQ Mark II. Let's see what we could do with that bass. So low frequencies, let's say 35. I'm just gonna sweep here and find something that I like. Mids. High frequency, do I want high frequency here? So without, with, right, so that just breathes a lot of life into this. So obviously when we throw the drums in here, it's not gonna sound great because we're just adding an entirely new element. So you know what, let's restart this for a second. And this time we're gonna lo-fi up this. So we're gonna basically just close up the frequency spectrum, give it some more mids. And drums are actually a great thing to EQ because it gives you the entire spectrum, right? So let's say I wanted to open up the high end and I wanted to focus specifically on those hi-hats. I find they're pretty loud in this mix. So let's find the frequency where they're maybe around here. It's kind of harsh. Pull that down. Right, so now those hi-hats are a lot more subtle. I would argue that this is the most production, maybe used for sampling or sound design pedal in this example because you can't save anything. Everything is on the fly. Again, like Float, everything is just right there on the surface. There's no screen. And if you choose a high quality pedal like ParaEQ, you're gonna find your ears just getting a lot sharper because you're gonna be relying on them a lot more. The only thing about ParaEQ that you need to know is that it's mono in, mono out. So if you wanted a stereo signal with the same quality, you'd have to buy 2 of these. And I've actually seen many people commit to that, but it's something that you should definitely know going into it. And speaking of the Boss EQ200, let's get into it. This has studio grade digital processing, which means very low noise. The cool thing about the Boss EQ200 is that you get dual modes. So manual mode, which is just, very simply pushing these faders and getting a visual of that EQ at the same time. There's also a lock mode here, which is great for a live setting in case you don't want to bump into anything and completely change your settings. So now I am locked. Like with the Source Audio EQ2, you also have a MIDI in setting where you're able to control settings here with an external MIDI controller, which is nice. Another interesting feature about this pedal is that you have several signal flow options. Mono, dual mono, stereo, and pre-post EQ for a ton of practical or musical applications. There's also 3 different frequency setups you can choose for more detailed sound shaping. So just like the other EQ pedals in this comparison, you've got a bunch of bands to work with. In this case, you've got 10, so much like the EQ2. I can boost up to 15 dB and reduce up to 15 dB on specific frequencies. In this example, I'm going to, let's say, cut quite a bit of the lows. So without it, you've got that kick. That kick is now pretty much gone. I really like the idea of the faders. It kind of reminds me of the TR-8S, which also has faders. They're just so useful in live settings like this. And again, you've got that dual world of having tons of control, but once again, if you need to be on the surface, it's right there. If I want to boost that level as well, I certainly can. This is one of my favorite parts of the pedal. Let's menu dive. I hit both of these to open up the menu. I could scroll down. This is my down, this is my up. I'm gonna scroll down to link. I'm going to unlink channel A and B. So you can see when it's linked, both of these are lit up. When it's unlinked, it's just A. So just like with the EQ2, now we're able to EQ left and right separately. And so I could jump back and forth now. So A has already been EQ'd. Let's go to B. If I want the same EQ, I could just budge these around a little bit so that they activate. Let's say I want this side to have some more low end. So you just get really intricate and precise. And you can get a really interesting stereo image this way. You could also get clever with audio routing with the EQ200 if you'd like to go mono out of input A into some effects pedals, back into input B. And once again, you can EQ that entire signal again. The next pedal we're gonna take a look at is the Dreadbox Kinematic. Right off the bat, great for synth users. Up top is where you could go modular if you'd like. CV input for the filter, CV input for the level, CV output for the envelope generator. It's a really simple pedal, so depending on where this switch is, it's either an envelope filter or a boost of frequency. Envelope filter is where it's a low pass. Let's turn this on here with the groove. It sounds really good on drums. And comp color is where it becomes a frequency booster. Also sounds great on drums. As you can see, we've got drive here as well, of course. The amount of envelope that you want to use, but again, this parameter here actually changes depending on which setting you have here. With envelope filter, it's an envelope of the input signal coming in. On comp color, it becomes the ratio of the compression. And of course, you've got level here as well, which will keep moderate for now. Let's keep running through this groove and see what this gives us. Again, I love it down here when just bringing the filter down, just the way it reacts to the drums. Like those hi-hats, the high end becomes so synthy. That's where I'm at. Off, on. So it just completely changes up the character of those drums. I love it. And the standout for me here is just the quality of the sound. You're working with 100% analog circuits, so that's evident in the sound, especially on drums. That is my filter review and just comparison of these pedals in general. Hopefully this video helped you out in some way and pointed you in the right direction. Lots of affiliate links for all of the gear mentioned in this video if you'd like to check that out. Please use those links, it helps this channel a lot.